Okay, so the Cold War, it started in 1947 and finished in 1991. It lasted for 44 years in total and was not long after the Second World War. Britain, which was represented by Churchill, the US, which was represented by Roosevelt, and the USSR, which was represented by Stalin, were all allies during World War II, and they were fighting Hitler together. When the war ended, the three leaders met at a conference in Yalta and discussed several matters such as what was going to happen after the war and how to help the economies of Europe. Well, then a metaphorical iron curtain was covered over Europe and split the Europeans in half. Uh, they split the communists in the Eastern Europe from the capitalists from the West, and this blanket was an image, or curtain was an image of communists not being covered over most of Eastern Europe. Communist USSR was being controlled by Stalin during the Cold War. The government believed that it was more important to be safe, secure, and stable than it was to have freedom or lots of money. Freedom wasn't as important as equality. That was something that the communists believed, which was quite different to what the capitalists believed. The capitalist state controlled by the US thought that freedom is most important, and it's the most important concept of the ideology of capitalism, and they thought freedom before taxes, freedom before equality, and freedom before speech or even law. Key actions of the US. They had the atomic bomb, which they used against Hiroshima during the World War II, and therefore this created mass destruction and killed many people and ruined Japan for decades after that. Those were the bad parts of that, and the good parts, however, were that they never actually used the atomic bomb during the Cold War because of fear of weapons coming at them. However, they managed to hold on to power by showing that they actually had the bomb and that they could use it, as they had shown in the past on Hiroshima. And this actually helped to overcome communism. Then there was the Truman Doctrine. This helped countries that were being threatened by the USSR of becoming communists by dropping tons of food and supplies to them, and this was challenging the Soviets, and therefore, as a response, the Soviets built the Berlin Wall, which separated the East and the West. Then they had the espionages as well, which went to the USSR to find out as much information as they could. And then there was a Marshall Aid, where billions of dollars went to Eastern Europe to rebuild their economies, and it was to try and stop the spread of communism. And this was to try and persuade the persuade the Eastern Europe to befriend them and trick them into becoming capitalists. And however, if the Eastern Europe realized what they were doing, then things could have gone wrong. Then key actions of the USSR. There was the blockade in Berlin, which was in East Berlin, and nobody could get there, and nobody could get out. People could not trade, get food, or even get electricity, and this choked the life out of them so that Stalin could control the land. And this was bad because Stalin, he felt like he had power over that little area because no one knew what was going on inside. It was like he was surrounding the whole place himself, and only he knew what was going on in there, and no one else, especially from the capitalists, could figure out what was going on. Then they had the espionages, and they were able to get knowledge about how to create the atomic bomb that the US had, and therefore they were able to create their own and even hold on to it like the US were, so that if the atomic bombs were launched, or rather the atomic bombs were used, then the USSR could also fight back with them. But this wasn't such a good thing because if that were to have happened, then they would have been just ruining themselves, because if the US were to use the bomb and then the USSR were to use the bomb, and then the US would surely fight back, resulting in the USSR also fighting back. Therefore, they were like adding to the fire continuously. If that were to have happened, however, it didn't, which was a good thing. Then they also managed to find out about the US planes that could not be seen on radar machines, which was quite handy and significant. Then the last leader of the Soviet Union was Mikhail Gorbachev. He had a little bit more of democracy in his mind, and he believed that some freedom can be had, yet still being communists. And then two strategies were developed from this, called the Glasnost, which was the opening of freedom, and then the Perestroika, which was the opening of the economic freedom. Opening up the Soviet Union helped to overcome the war. However, he could not control what was happening, and therefore Boris Yeltsin became president of the USSR. Not long after, then the USSR broke up into several small countries, and the Cold War was over. Out of the actions that came from the capitalists, I would say that the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Aid actions were the best, as it helped many others and there were no negative intentions behind it. The only thing that the capitalists hoped to get out of these actions was that they hoped the communists would see that the Europeans were being helped by the capitalists. Therefore, they might have backed off with their communism spreading and realized that the West were bigger than the East, and they could persuade or trick the Europeans to think that the USSR were bad, and perhaps the USSR might have given up. Then there was the possession of nuclear weapons. This always has a deterrence value. If the USSR were to have bombed the US, there would have been a mutually assured destruction, because if one bombed the other government, then that government would have definitely been able to fire back, as I mentioned before, resulting in either being better off. The nuclear weapon would cause living abilities to become terrible, and it would have several after effects, as it can be seen from Japan's history. These actions that the communists took were not all good either. For instance, the blockade of the Berlin Wall wasn't good because it made people suffer. It locked many in a confined place, which meant that they couldn't get out, and that they had to be continuously under the rule of Stalin. Yes, so did most of Eastern Europe. However, it wasn't as bad as inside the Berlin Wall, because that was completely deadlocked. There was no way of getting out. However, outside in the rest of Eastern Europe, there were places to hide. You could have gone somewhere else, things like that. Whereas inside the Berlin Wall, it wasn't like that. It was just continuously as if Stalin is on top of your head. On the other hand, the ideas that the last leader of the USSR had, Mikhail Gorbachev, he opened many opportunities for the government, and eventually those ideas resulted in the spread of communism to be stopped, and soon the Cold War was over, so that was good. Thank you.